As I perused this, I felt myself growing gradually smaller and smaller, and when I came to the point at which the editor sneered at the poem as verses, there was little more than an ounce of me left. As for Opadeldoc, I began to experience compassion for the poor fellow. But the Goosetherum showed, if possible, less mercy than the lollipop. It was the Goosetherum that said, "A wretched poetaster who signs himself Opadeldoc is silly enough to fancy that we will print and pay for a medley of incoherent and ungrammatical bombast, which he has transmitted to us, and which commences with the following most intelligible line: Hail, holy light, offspring of heaven, firstborn." We say most intelligible. Opadeldoc, whoever he is, will be kind enough to tell us, perhaps, how hail can be holy light. We always regarded it as frozen rain. Will he inform us also how frozen rain can be at one and the same time both holy light, whatever that is, and an offspring, which latter term, if we understand anything about English, is only employed with propriety in reference to small babies of about 6 weeks old? But it is preposterous to descant upon such absurdity, although Opadeldoc, whoever he is, has the unparalleled effrontery to suppose that we will not only insert his ignorant rantings, but absolutely pay for them. Now this is fine. It is rich. And we have half a mind to punish this young scribbler for his egotism by really publishing his effusion verbatim et literatim, as he has written it. We could inflict no punishment so severe, and we would inflict it but for the boredom which we should cause our readers in so doing. Let Opadeldoc, whoever he is, send any future composition of like character to the humdrum, the lollipop, or the rowdy dow. They will insert it. They insert every month just such stuff. Send it to them. We are not to be insulted with impunity. This made an end of me. And as for the humdrum, the rowdy dow, and the lollipop, I never could comprehend how they survived it. The putting them in the smallest possible minion, that was the rub, thereby insinuating their lowness, their baseness, while we stood looking down upon them in gigantic capitals. Oh, it was too bitter. It was wormwood. It was gall. Had I been either of these periodicals, I would have spared no pains to have the Goosetherum prosecuted. It might have been done under the Act of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. As for Opadeldoc, whoever he was, I had by this time lost all patience with the fellow and sympathized with him no longer. He was a fool beyond doubt, whoever he was, and got not a kick more than he deserved. The result of my experiment with the old books convinced me, in the first place, that honesty is the best policy, and in the second, that if I could not write better than Mr. Dante, and the two blind men, and the rest of the old set, it would at least be a difficult matter to write worse. I took heart, therefore, and determined to prosecute the entirely original, as they say on the covers of the magazines, at whatever cost of study and pains. I again placed before my eyes, as a model, the brilliant stanzas on The Oil of Bob by the editor of the Gadfly, and resolved to construct an ode on the same sublime theme in rivalry of what had already been done. With my first line I had no material difficulty. It ran thus: To pen an ode upon the oil of Bob. Having carefully looked out, however, all the legitimate rhymes to Bob, I found it impossible to proceed. In this dilemma I had recourse to paternal aid, and after some hours of mature thought, my father and myself thus constructed the poem. To pen an ode upon the oil of Bob is all sorts of a job. Signed, Snob. To be sure, this composition was of no very great length, but I have yet to learn, as they say in the Edinburgh Review, that the mere extent of a literary work has anything to do with its merit. As for the quarterly cant about sustained effort, it is impossible to see the sense of it. Upon the whole, therefore, I was satisfied with the success of my maiden attempt, and now the only question regarded the disposal I should make of it. My father suggested that I should send it to the gadfly, but there were 2 reasons which operated to prevent me from doing so. From so doing, I dreaded the jealousy of the editor, and I had ascertained that he did not pay for original contributions. I therefore, after due deliberation, consigned the article to the more dignified pages of the Lollipop, and awaited the event in anxiety, but with resignation. In the very next published number, I had the proud satisfaction of seeing my poem printed at length as the leading article, with the following significant words prefixed in italics and between brackets. We call the attention of our readers to the subjoined admirable stanzas on the oil of Bob. We need say nothing of their sublimity or of their pathos. It is impossible to peruse them without tears. Those who have been nauseated with a sad dose on the same august topic from the goose quill of the editor of the Gadfly will do well to compare the 2 compositions. P.S. We are consumed with anxiety to probe the mystery which envelops the evident pseudonym Snob. May we hope for a personal interview? All this was scarcely more than justice, but it was, I confess, rather more than I had expected. I acknowledged this, be it observed, to the everlasting disgrace of my country and of mankind. I lost no time, however, in calling upon the editor of the Lollipop, and had the good fortune to find this gentleman at home. He saluted me with an air of profound respect, slightly blended with a fatherly and patronizing admiration, wrought in him, no doubt, by my appearance of extreme youth and inexperience. Begging me to be seated, he entered at once upon the subject of my poem, but modesty will ever forbid me to repeat the 1,000 compliments which he lavished upon me. The eulogies of Mr. Crabbe, such was the editor's name, were, however, by no means fulsomely indiscriminate. He analyzed my composition with much freedom and great ability, not hesitating to point out a few trivial defects, a circumstance which elevated him highly in my esteem. The Gadfly was, of course, brought upon the tapis, and I hope never to be subjected to a criticism so searching, or to rebukes so withering, as were bestowed by Mr. Crabbe upon that unhappy effusion. I had become accustomed to regard the editor of the Gadfly as something superhuman, but Mr. Crabbe soon disabused me of that idea. He set the literary as well as the personal character of the Fly, so Mr. C. satirically designated the rival editor, in its true light. He, the Fly, was very little better than he should be. He had written infamous things. He was a penny-a-liner and a buffoon. He was a villain. He had composed a tragedy which set the whole country in a guffaw, and a farce which deluged the universe with tears. Besides all this, he had the impudence to pen what he meant for a lampoon upon himself, Mr. Crabbe, and the temerity to style him an ass. Should I at any time wish to express my opinion of Mr. Fly, the pages of the Lollipop, Mr. Crabbe assured me, were at my unlimited disposal. In the meantime, as it was very certain that I would be attacked in the Fly for my attempt at composing a rival poem on the oil of Bob, he, Mr. Crabbe, would take it upon himself to attend pointedly to my private and personal interests. If I were not made a man of at once, it should not be the fault of himself, Mr. Crabbe. Mr. Crabbe, having now paused in his discourse, the latter portion of which I found it impossible to comprehend, I ventured to suggest something about the remuneration which I had been taught to expect for my poem by an announcement on the cover of the Lollipop declaring that it, the Lollipop, insisted upon being permitted to pay exorbitant prices for all accepted contributions, frequently expending more money for a single brief poem than the whole annual cost of the Humdrum, the Rowdy-Dow, and the Goose the Rumfoodle combined. As I mentioned the word remuneration, Mr. Crabbe first opened his eyes and then his mouth to quite a remarkable extent, causing his personal appearance to resemble that of a highly agitated elderly duck in the act of quacking. And in this condition he remained, ever and anon pressing his hands tightly to his forehead as if in a state of desperate bewilderment, until I had nearly made an end of what I had to say. Upon my conclusion he sank back into his seat as if much overcome, letting his arms fall lifelessly by his side, but keeping his mouth still rigorously open after the fashion of the duck. While I remained in speechless astonishment at behavior so alarming, he suddenly leapt to his feet and made a rush at the bell-rope. But just as he reached this, he appeared to have altered his intention, whatever it was, for he dived under a table and immediately reappeared with a cudgel. This he was in the act of uplifting, for what purpose I am at a loss to imagine, when all at once there came a benign smile over his features, and he sank placidly back in his chair. "Mr. Bob," he said, for I had sent up my card before ascending myself. "Mr. Bob, you are a young man, I presume?" "Very?" I assented, adding that I had not yet concluded my third lustrum.